credit. Maikleseil러, the CEO of business intelligence software firm MicroStrategy, with getting Tesla electrified on crypto. Saylor, whose firm currently owns more than $2.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, tweeted Musk back in December, urging him to sink Tesla's cash into the alternative currency too, saying, quote, Elon Musk, if you want to do your shareholders a $100 billion favor, convert the Tesla balance sheet from dollars to Bitcoin. That tweet helped lead to Tesla's big disclosure yesterday. Maikleseil러, who believes other CEOs will soon follow Musk's high-profile lead, joins us now. Michael, fantastic to have you on the show. How should we view Tesla's decision and what it means for others?
Well, we're in an environment where the money supply is expanding at 15% a year or more, and we expect that to continue for the next 4 to 8 years. So for corporations that are cash rich, cash is the dilutive asset on the balance sheet. It's losing 15% of its purchasing power every year. So by converting a non-performing asset into the best performing asset, which is Bitcoin, they convert a dilutive asset into a accretive asset, and it's really good for shareholder value.
So you're basically saying you prefer to have volatile appreciation versus stable depreciation if the value of the dollar is falling?
I think that's well put.
But what about the risk profile of Bitcoin? I mean, if you're talking about treasury departments for these corporates, and Tesla perhaps is a separate issue, traditionally what they'd invest in is short-term instruments, hold it in cash because they want to preserve capital.
You know, the world before March of 2020 was a different world where we had low monetary expansion and high interest rates. And the world for the next 8 to 10 years looks like a world where we're going to have low interest rates, high monetary inflation, and it's nearly certain that cash on the balance sheet is going to lose 75 to 80% of its shareholder value. And so switching it out to a digital asset like Bitcoin, which has been going up more than 200% a year on average for the past decade, it might be short-term, a little bit volatile, and certainly it's new, it's a paradigm shift. But if you're looking out for the long-term interest of your shareholders, I think they would prefer that you double their money every 6 months than lose 75% of their money with a guarantee over the next 8 years.
I mean, do you think the Federal Reserve should be asking big questions of itself here, where it's a better investment decision to invest in an asset that's, what, 13 years old versus something that the government itself issues? I mean, I know this is part of the thesis why people are getting so excited about Bitcoin and those that believe that fiat currencies are being debased. But the Federal Reserve surely has to take action here when this is the argument we're making.
Well, you know, I think the story here is that Bitcoin is digital gold, and it's engineered to be like gold, but superior to gold in all aspects. And it's also the world's first digital monetary network. So imagine a block of $1 billion of gold that moves at the speed of light, that you can program 1 million times a second in order to provide a framework for the 21st century finance system. This is monetary technology. And just like all big tech, it's making financial systems more efficient. I don't think it's going to replace the dollar. I think that what's happening is Bitcoin is replacing gold as a non-sovereign store of value running on a big tech network.
How quickly do you think other corporates decide to invest in digital assets like Bitcoin? And do you recommend diversifying? It's not just about Bitcoin, there are other options.
It took us months to work through the issues, and we uploaded our corporate playbook for Bitcoin and open sourced it to the rest of the world, and now it just takes days. Last week, we had 7,000 different firms attend our Bitcoin for Corporations Summit. The materials have gone viral with 250,000 or more views in just a matter of days. And I think 1,000 companies adopted Bitcoin as digital gold after March of 2020, and there's a stampede on in 2021. So it's a story you're going to hear.
You know, if I look at you specifically, and you're a software company, and I look at your share price and I look at the price of Bitcoin, and the two charts basically match. And so I guess a critic would look at this and say, actually, your fundamental business now has become a sideline and you're a digital stock. What would your response be, Michael?
We have two strategies. One strategy is to grow our software business, and that is a good business, makes a lot of money, and it is growing. And our second strategy is to acquire Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is the emerging dominant digital monetary network. It's going to be 100 times bigger than Google or Facebook. And when companies like Amazon plugged into the internet, you know, people didn't say, are you an internet company or a retail company? I think they're a technology company embracing the future. Everybody's eventually going to plug into a digital monetary network like Bitcoin, just like everybody eventually plugged into the internet.
But how do those two businesses connect that you're now in?
Every business has a P&L and it has a balance sheet. And if your balance sheet is sitting in US dollars that are yielding zero interest, losing 15% of their value, they're depreciating. And so every single business can convert their balance sheet from a depreciating asset to an appreciating asset. That's good for every shareholder. So look, if we're running a company in Argentina and I told you the peso was going to devalue against the dollar by 99%, every business in Argentina would be wise to convert their pesos into dollars on the balance sheet for the benefit of their shareholders.
And that's such a great point to make, though I do love how we're comparing the United States now to Argentina.
Well, you know, every company has a basic balance sheet currency, whether it's euros or dollars or something. The difference after March is that those fiat currencies are weakening at a more rapid rate. In essence, the cost of capital tripled after March. And so conventional treasury approaches that worked for a decade have to be reconsidered. And that's why you see 1,000 companies embracing Bitcoin as digital gold.
Tesla is an S&P 500 company. What proportion of S&P 500 companies do you think switch to putting some of their cash on their balance sheet into digital assets, and over what time horizon? Like, when do we get 5%, 10% of those companies doing this? Because it is a shift and it requires board approval.
Yeah, public companies take longer. Sometimes they take 3 to 6 months, depending upon their situation. I think that this is a trend that's going to run for the next decade. And this year, you're going to see many public companies do this. We saw Tesla, we saw Marathon, we saw Square, we saw MicroStrategy. I think that you'll see double, triple, quadruple that number come. And then I think every year that follows, traditionally, Bitcoin's growing 200 to 300% a year. I think if you crank in a 200% growth rate across all the various dimensions of growth, you'll see that continue for the next 5 years, and then it will taper down to 150 and 100 and then 50 and then 30 and then 20. It's a story for the decade.
Yeah. How do you manage the quarterly plunge, let's say, in digital asset prices? Because we talked a little bit about the volatility at the beginning of the interview. If you're a corporate treasurer in a big company that has to manage that cash flow and perhaps needs that cash, how do you manage that?
Well, many companies have assets and they don't need them in the coming 12 weeks. They're holding them to capitalize the company. Like an endowment at a university, you're holding it for the long-term benefit of the customers and the shareholders and the employees. At MicroStrategy, we keep about $50 million in working capital, and we convert all of our excess cash flows into our primary treasury reserve asset, which is Bitcoin. For companies that are cash flow positive, they really don't need ready cash in large quantities because they're generating cash. What they need to do is to avoid debasing their treasury at a rapid rate. If money debases at 15% a year, and if you generate 15% operating income, you're working as hard as you can to generate nothing for the shareholders for the entire year, because you're losing as much money in your treasury as you're actually generating from your business operation. So this is a cash sweeping into treasury so that the balance sheet accretes in value instead of diluting in value with time.
Or even just holds flat, quite frankly.
Yeah, by the way, all these companies, Apple, Google, Facebook, they generate massive amounts of cash. So if they take that cash and invest it in an asset which is losing purchasing power at 15, 20% a year, they're destroying shareholder value. They don't, and by the way, the volatility is only over the course of days and weeks. If you look at volatility with a 4-year time frame or a 10-year time frame, The only thing you see is it's just going up 200% every single year.
And these companies like Apple are putting this money to work in better ways, just they haven't taken the step into a crypto yet. Michael, great to have you with us. I have about 30 seconds. Go on, what were you going to say?
Well, the traditional approach of companies was to borrow money and generate cash flow and buy their own stock back, but that means they're decapitalizing their company. Another approach is to take that money and invest in an asset which is appreciating against their working currency. That provides a much firmer capital base for the company. Again, it's like if a university gave its entire endowment away, it wouldn't make it a better institution. And companies should be building an endowment, building a capital base so that they can make good on their obligations to their employees and their customers and their vendors over the long frame of time.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve should be shuddering. Maikleseil러, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us and explaining your thoughts. The CEO of MicroStrategy there.